Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I'm excited to share my conversation with Natalia Tafur. She has developed a deep sense of curiosity stemming from living in Latin America as a child and then in Europe as a young adult. After building a long career within the automotive industry, she serendipitously landed in a market research role where she discovered her passion for research. As a qualitative researcher, and we'll explain the difference between quantitative and qualitative, I'm sure, through this conversation. She leverages her sense of curiosity along with experiences from being a call center operator as an English teacher and a marketing professional to understand both the customer and the client's needs. And by listening to people's authentic stories and analyzing data, she can unlock meaningful and actionable insights that help organizations develop strategic plans. Welcome to the show today, Natalia.
Hi, Felina. Thank you so much. It's such a fun opportunity to join you on this podcast today.
Absolutely. Excited to share your story. So let's start with that. Take us back and tell us more about you.
Well, thank you. Well, you did a very good intro of kind of how I got here in my journey. So I may come back and visit a few of those points. But yes, it's, they always say hindsight is 20/20, and it kind of all makes sense as to why things happen and where you ended up. But like you mentioned, my first job out of college was actually at a customer, service center, which is not kind of the ideal career path after you finish your very expensive 4-year degree. But I have to tell you, it was one of those, amazing experiences. It was extremely tough. But after that year or year and a half, I really knew more than about the organization than most people did within that organization. But what I really got to know were customers, what motivates them, what drives them, how do they react to things? And that's really where I got my first taste of customer interviews, to be all honest. I was almost like a phone psychologist with people who were either happy or not happy.
What was that? Yeah, what was that experience specifically? Who were you working for?
I was working for Nissan. They had actually recruited me straight out of college, and this was kind of the career path for college graduates to kind of get their feet wet in the automotive industry and then move on up. And, I had not only a very interesting and fulfilling professional experience in that role, but I also made some very great friends that I'm still in touch with today. So it was great in many aspects. And then from there, I had always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to go live abroad again. And I had studied abroad 1 year in college in Rome, and I was determined to go back there and make it work. And really the path of least resistance was teaching English. And funny enough, that also kind of pointed in the direction of market research, because it really gave me the confidence to be in front of adults and in front of groups and really lead the discussion and take command and do a lot of planning too. I had to do a lot of lesson planning, and that's another skill that you need to do when you're designing research as well. And from there, I went and got my international MBA at Thunderbird. You may or may not know it's located out of Phoenix, and it has one of the leading international business programs. And again, not by design, I ended up back at Nissan again, and I was in their product planning department. It was great. It's a great department to get a lot of what I call street cred within the organization, because you're really at the heart of what Nissan is doing when you're talking about planning their products. But one thing led to another, and then I ended up in the market research department. And I know so many of your podcast people talk about how the recession really shaped their careers. And I'm one of those people, but I really it was an opportunity for me because the company was looking for ways to cut costs. So they decided to train everybody in our department on how to be a moderator. So instead of hiring companies or other consultants to do that, they said, let's train our own people to do that. And, I really took off flying. I had a lot of opportunities to put my new skill to work. And that's really what I've been doing for the past 10 years up until the point of, deciding to strike out on my own and get my feet wet in that role a little bit more.
Awesome. Well, I want to spend a little more time before we get to your current business, which you launched just about 5 months ago. Let's go back and talk about this world of market research. It's such a big deal for many companies, but as small business owners, we kind of don't think about it as much, right? Partially probably because we're pretty, face to face with our customers a lot of times, especially as service providers, but larger companies like Nissan are not, right? They're not interacting with their customers directly. In fact, there's a few steps away from the customer. Dealers are kind of the middleman in that world, of course. And so really understanding what the customer wants and needs is so critical. I want to answer that question just by way of definition here, quantitative versus qualitative information that companies are collecting. What's the difference and how does that all work?
That's a great question, Selena. And I have to tell you, when I tell people I'm a researcher, the first thing they want to say is, great, I want to do an online survey. Can you help me do that? And I think that's pretty natural because I think all of us have probably completed close to 1,000 online surveys at some point in our life, or maybe even a phone survey. So it's what we're familiar with. And those kinds of surveys fall into what we call quantitative. It's a very numbers-based and data-rich type of research, which can be great. But like the saying goes, it's better together. I think that the most complete type of research also has qualitative components. And when we're talking about qualitative, we're talking about really interviewing and interacting, whether in a group setting or one-on-one with the client. So there's a few ways that qualitative research can be leveraged that people oftentimes overlook. One thing is, if you are thinking about doing an online study, I highly encourage you to think about doing qualitative before you do the study. So you're making sure that you're asking the right questions. I just worked on a project recently where I was brought on only after some online research had been done. And there was a list of concerns that the client had come up with. And it turns out that out of the 15 concerns, 14 of those concerns we were told that they weren't even concerns at all. So this was a huge lost opportunity because they didn't do any research ahead of time to find out what are the concerns that are really resonating with people and how deep are they. So doing something before a quantitative survey is very critical, and it doesn't have to be in depth, but it can give you some direction. Now, I also think that once you do the online survey, you might be feeling really confident. You have some really great data points and you're ready to run to your executives or your internal audience or maybe your investors or your clients, and you're feeling really smart. But let me tell you, in that presentation, they're going to ask you why these data points exist. Why is this high? Why do these numbers look so different? And without doing the right qualitative follow-up research after that online study, you won't know what's going on. This follow-up type of qualitative study really helps you build what I call color, context, and clarity. It really adds a depth to make you sound intelligent. So you really know what's going on with the study, and it gives you kind of a more complete outlook on what's going on and making those investment dollars go to use.
Yeah, makes sense. It's so interesting as I think about this. I'm going to stay on the Nissan path here for a minute. And you could feel free to bring any other examples of maybe current work you're bringing in, but cars in general. I I would imagine so much has to go into this to really understand, how people are interacting with your product. It, I can't even imagine the in-depth, research you must be doing to even, and I don't know, I heard this term in my not so fancy MBA program and studied this a little bit of like ethnographic research, which I believe is really kind of just following people around to some extent. Is that right? I mean, I would imagine just this really in-depth understanding of how people interact with the product on a daily basis.
Yeah, you touched upon a lot of great points there. In terms of automotive and in so many other categories, I mean, it's a really, robust list of research that you should be doing. So typically in the automotive world, we have what we call upstream research, which is in the product development stage, and really even before the product development, the target development. Who are we really going after? Who in 5 years from now, when we launch this car, is going to be driving this car? What are their needs? So really identifying the different targets. And then you kind of go into the upstream. What are we going to put on this vehicle? What are the features that are going to fulfill the needs of those customers? And then you launch the vehicle, and you have kind of some of the traditional, launch timing studies that you do. And you also have ongoing studies. A car might be really hot the year it comes out, but maybe a year or two in, when other competitors come to market, that's not really relevant anymore. So there's really a deep need in the automotive world and in many other worlds to just continuously engage in research. So that's really important. And then you brought up ethnographies, which makes me really happy because, ethnographies is really getting to where the rubber meets the road. Many times that just means in-home interviews. So if you're just talking with, normal customers and you want to know how they are interacting with, their vehicles, their furniture, their kitchenware, you really want to go to where the things are happening and saying, how do they really interact with this? Are they using a pot holder? Are they using the emergency brake? How are they using these products? And it doesn't always have to be in home. Maybe you're talking about something in the professional world. How do office workers, sit at their desk, or how does a nurse interact with her patients? So again, it just really means going to where it happens and understanding the usage and the behaviors behind using different products and the attitudes that go along with that.
Yeah, I would imagine just asking people is probably not good enough, right? Because we have very selective memory. So if you ask somebody, I mean, I'll just take an example you gave, do you always set your emergency brake when you park? And I would imagine in market research, a lot of people want to look better than they are. That doesn't quite make sense, but you know what I mean? They probably like, yes, of course, I always turn on my blinker when I turn, stuff like that, right? Where if you can observe them doing it, you're probably going to get much truer data or information. What comes to mind is somebody following you around your house or, whatever, your office. But I would imagine technology is probably coming into play here to, help with some of those observations. Is that right?
That's spot on. Yes, technology is playing a much bigger role, even in the qualitative world, which you might think is a little bit fuzzy or poofy or fluffy. But there are so many new online tools to do that. So, many times we as researchers don't even need to be there. That's not always the case. It's ideal to do that. But, you could send a customer to a shopping trip and have them video on their phone the different fruits they're looking at, why they chose this, certain fruit, why they didn't. You might even put augmented reality onto that as well to see how they would react to different concepts as well. So there's so many opportunities to incorporate technology into the qualitative research field, where before you might think, oh, data and technology is just for kind of an online survey platform, but it's so much more. We can do a lot of product journaling. We can do interviews. There's so many tools that technology allows qualitative researchers these days. So it's really great.
So let's take this into the small business world. I want to bring this now into this business that you launched, Keyhole Research and Consulting. So many different sort of layers to this, but just to break it down, because most of our listeners are small business owners.
Sure.
What are some of the tools or what's some of the advice you would give somebody? And I'm just going to make up a very specific example. Let's say I'm a small business attorney and I'm helping people with, business entity setup and contracts and just, the business law basics for small business owners. What would your recommendations be to that small business owner of what to think about as they think about qualitative or quantitative research around their business?
Yeah, I think, the answer I'm going to give you is very tied to even marketing. And that is that we need to put ourselves in the shoes of the customer, right? I know we get so caught up in, the features and, the services we offer because that's our pitch on a daily basis. But really when we're asking questions, instead of saying, how great is my, purple doingy bobber, you want to know more about how it makes them feel. What are the struggles that they're dealing with and really getting to their needs? So instead of saying 50% of people loved it, maybe it's 50% of people who felt scared later on felt comfortable when I offered them my legal services and felt more confident about the business choices they were making. So I think really turning it around and not thinking, from the inside out, but really from the outside in. What are you doing to fulfill their needs? And I think that's way more convincing as well if you have to pitch to any investors as well. They want to know, how the customers think about it and how it made them feel.
Yeah. And what role does now this whole world of online reviews play into research? Because you've got lots of people that are very vocal about your product or service, whether that's on Yelp or, Google reviews or, the dozens of other places people are talking about products or services. As a researcher, how do you look at that info? What do you do with it?
Yeah, it's incredible just with the boom of social media and people being able to reach out to one another or just read reviews of strangers, but putting a lot of faith in that. And we did a lot of in-depth study at Nissan to understand, what is driving, quality perceptions, for example, and where it used to be, I'll go talk to an expert in the field, or I will go buy, a magazine or a book that goes very in depth and gives a very professional perspective. More and more people these days are putting faith in the real users. They want to know, if you're going to that Amazon review, and people are very realistic too. I mean, you go and you see, what are the 5-star reviews and what are the 4-star reviews, but people know that they also want to look at the 1-star reviews. Where are those little pain points that people had with their experience? And, maybe it's somewhere in the middle, but I think people like to understand the extremes of that, and people want to know what other real people are thinking, not necessarily what experts are thinking, because more and more we know that that's not as authentic. These experts tend to be paid or incentivized to say certain things because they got to drive a free car for the weekend, or a certain company has put them up at a very nice hotel and wined and dined them. So putting some faith in real users, that definitely carries weight more than it ever has in the past.
So let's talk about your business.
Okay.
What's the focus moving forward? What types of clients are you targeting with your work? What type of work specifically are you doing?
Sure. So, I continue to cater on on one side to, larger clients like automotive industry, or even to larger research firms that need to bring in an automotive expert. And that continues to live on, but I'm also looking at expanding. And, many times there are medium-sized companies that don't have a dedicated staff for research. And that's where I can kind of come in as a consultant. I can come in to actually carry through the research from A to Z and deliver the insights in all kinds of different creative and new ways. And, even startups that have a product idea and, before you take the step of getting more investment, you might need to kind of test the waters a little bit and see what people think and how they react to different products or services that you're thinking about taking on. So I can kind of take on all of those different areas and answer those kinds of questions.
And what does that look like? I just want to get really granular here, Natalia. Is that
Sure.
focus groups? Is that, what are some of the tools that you're using?
Sure. Now, focus groups is probably what's most familiar to people, either because you've been in one or you've seen one of many commercials with what I call phony focus groups. But either way, you're probably familiar with them. And that's still a very valuable technique. There are limitations. You have to have everyone at the same place in the same room, including the client in the back room. So sometimes there's some scheduling issues there. Sometimes you have some group think, but at the end of the day, you still can walk away with some very powerful insight. So that's a much more traditional approach. Another approach is what I call emerging, but I really love it, are what I would coin as online diaries. So you can enroll between 20 and 50 respondents to participate in a multi-day online study that is qualitative in nature. I would be the online moderator, and there would be approximately what I call 3 or 4 modules of activity. So a module would be about 30 minutes worth of investment, answering different questions, giving your opinions. There might be card sorting activities. It might be kind of closed-ended questions, or it could just be, what is your bucket list? What are the 10 things you want to do by the age of 80? All kinds of interesting things. And they go through a series of modules throughout the whole activity. And what's really great about this is that unlike an online survey, where it's really you have one shot at talking to the respondents, here there's an opportunity to do some follow-up work and probe deeper. So if they said, I only like driving purple cars, I can then come back and say, wow, that is so intriguing. What is driving that? Why do you love purple cars so much? And the client can also see everything that is going on real time. So if you want really fast insights, this is a great way to do that. And it's just really fun. And like I said, I always like to follow up with some more qualitative research if that's possible. But maybe among those 20, 30, or 40 respondents, there is just 1 or 2 that you're like, wow, this is our superstar person. This is exactly who I envisioned talking about it. And maybe that becomes the face of your persona that you create when you're developing your product. So there's so many fun things that you can do that with this tool. And I love it because it's online, but it's really on everyone's schedule and no travel is required. So it can be a very high value tool to use.
That's great. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, talk a little more about, as you develop your business, different areas you're looking to get into, different service offerings. Just in general, what do you see on the horizon?
A lot of exciting things, Selena. As I mentioned, I'm still definitely keeping one foot in the automotive world. I have a lot of passion for that. But I am now in the process of expanding the different categories. And, I'm already looking into things like healthcare and fitness and well-being. All of those areas, super interesting. Anything that is really B2C. I love working with the end client customers, but also kind of exploring the world of B2B to see if there's a lot of leverage and a lot of insight that I can deliver to the end users there as well. So I'm kind of feeling it out, and I'm excited. I think there's a lot of challenges ahead, but I'm always one up for a challenge.
And I want to go back to your decision to launch your own business. You were at Nissan for a long time, and there obviously was a point where you said, "Okay, I'm going to do my own thing." Talk about that process.
Exactly. This is it. Really, like I said, I kind of fell into this, and I naturally discovered this new passion of, getting my feet dirty and kind of getting into the trenches with the customers and unlocking these insights. And what happened was, within the corporate world, when you get promoted, kind of like in a traditional corporate hierarchy, you move up the management chain and you really end up managing larger and larger teams. But with that movement, you also kind of move further away from the actual research and the field work. And that's really where I wanted to go. I did not want to stray far from that. So that's why I said, you know what, I appreciate people who take that path. They're very bold and very brave, but I wanted to take a different path that was more difficult to achieve within kind of a corporate structured environment. So this, going out on my own really opened up a lot of opportunities, and I felt that I had a strong enough network within the research community where I could, leverage that to kind of get me off and started on my feet. And, that has already paid dividends. Everyone is so supportive. I love it. And I feel like I have like a huge cheerleading squad, including at Hera Hub too. But I just love, everyone's so encouraging. In fact, today I spoke with someone who was a 6th grade classmate of mine in Argentina, and he was giving me all kinds of tips and tricks, and there might even be an opportunity to work with him. So it's just such a fun path and journey to be on.
Wonderful. Well, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
The easiest way to do that is definitely go to my website. It's pretty easy. It's keyholeresearch.com. And you can reach out. You can send me a message there. And my phone and email information is also there. And they can learn more about, what I can offer as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Natalia.
Thank you, Felina. It's been fun.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.